Okaerishimata minasan. Today, because I need the bread and boosting the algorithm, I decided to upload something. Been meaning to talk about this for a while, for the fun of it, and so for the topic of today's video, I'll be talking about one of the most underrated leaders in history. Somebody who I've always wanted to do a little bit more research outside of just barely hearing him outside of being the richest person in recorded history one time in middle school. Mansa Musa is often remembered for being one of the most significant leaders in Mali's history, but in this video I want to dive a little deeper and see everything that I personally think is cool and interesting. Known about Mansa Musa's early life, but it's speculated that he was born in the early 14th century, being born into nobility as he would be in power by his early 20s, which I'll get to in a second. Most of what we know about Musa is from Arabic sources, primarily from Ibn Battuta and al-Umari, and there are also sources coming from local manuscripts and oral traditions, so as a heads up, if I happen to mispronounce anything, my apologies. Sono gengo wakaranai kedo. The term Mansa is a local Mandinka term meaning king or ruler, and Musa is just the Arabic version of the name Moses. Yet to add to the complexity of Musa's title, he inherited the name Kanka. The spellings differ from sources, but it mostly comes from his mother. To keep it all simple, I will just be referring to him as just Mansa Musa or simply Musa. Within the line of Mali royalty, Musa was the ninth leader, with the line of successions going back and forth between the Sanjata line and Abu Bakr's line, with Musa's predecessors, Muhammad ibn Q, being the last leader of the Sanjata line. Muhammad ibn Q was so obsessed with sailing the Atlantic Ocean that he sent 2 voyages out to explore. The first fleet had 200 ships and the second one was attempted with 2,000 ships, and Muhammad personally went there with his crew on the second voyage, appointing Musa to take his spot temporarily. But when it became clear that Muhammad ibn Q was not returning anytime soon, Musa just assumed the throne to himself. If this story is true, it's pretty omoshiroi, if you feel. Like, damn. They really sent these large-ass fleets to try to sail the whole Atlantic Ocean more than 150 years before Columbus did. It's rumored that Muhammad ibn Q went to the New World, but there is no solid evidence, so I'm just gonna disregard that information and move on. But I will admit that from a Western perspective, it is still pretty impressive that Africa had the similar technology of like sailboats and trying to sail the Atlantic at around the same time, if not a little earlier, gotta give them credit where credit is due. Given that the rise of a new Mansa would have been news in the empire, Musa began various campaigns, which included conquering local tribes and converting them into Islam, as well as subjugating those who refused to convert, as well as just saving up to go to his first pilgrimage to Mecca or Hajj. His goal with all of this was just to further connect himself with the Islamic world, which at the time was just peak world civilization. Another result of his conquest was his wealth. It's truly unknown just how wealthy Mansa Musa was actually, but common estimates place him at around 400 billion, making him as rich as Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk put together. Now, how did Musa earn his wealth, you may be asking? Through conquest, he expanded the Kingdom of Mali's territory to include important trading cities such as Timbuktu and Gao, but also by owning massive reserves of gold and salt within his territory. Musa's wealth was largely from natural resources and trade, enforcing the routes that had already existed to connect him to the Middle East, but as well as creating new ones to connect to other neighboring Muslim nations. Controversially, the emperor needed laborers to help extract these resources, and as was common practice in those times, Mansa Musa had a whole surplus of slaves, often from recently conquered lands and, as I mentioned, those who didn't convert to Islam. Another practice that Musa had done to promote the economy of the empire was to help establish early institutions and get architects from the nearby empires such as Andalusia in present-day Morocco and Spain to help collab on creating mosques and universities, especially in Gao and Timbuktu. And though I may have pointed out that Musa did the cringe practice of slavery, he was a rather generous leader, as during his many trips to Mecca he would give out large sums of gold to the various cities he'd stop by, even allegedly crashing the price of gold for a decade because of one night in Cairo. Yes, Mansa Musa was so wealthy that he could destroy the economy in just one night. These charitable acts were also in part of him trying to bless up his fellow Muslim nations like the Mamluks in Egypt and the Moors of North Africa, or those in charge of Mecca itself. Bro was real like that. He shared his bread with his homies. An account from Al-Umari once said that Musa refused the opportunity to meet the Mamluk Sultan in Cairo, stating that he was only there as a stopping point on his way to Mecca, on his first pilgrimage. And this was essentially the story of how he single-handedly plowed the economy for gold. Because as a method of compensation for not meeting the Sultan, he gives out 1/4 of the whole world's wealth into one city. Imagine if Mr. Beast came over to like Somalia or like just the sticks or some shit and like gives out $1 billion to the locals. Not a perfect comparison, but it's still an interesting thought to have in comparison to the modern times that we live in. He would later try to undo the damages by taking back some of the gold from the economy, but it still took over a decade to recover. As he returned to Mali, he would invest his money back into the previously mentioned educational institutions and mosques as well as the army. The details on Mansa Musa's death are uncertain, but it's generally accepted that he either died in 1332 or 1337. Personally, it makes more sense to me that he would have died in 1337 because his reign is generally said to have lasted around 25 years, and he likely died during a conquest against the Songhai or the northern kingdoms in like modern Algeria or Morocco. The sources aren't clear because the accounts differ from Arabic and Islamic historians. Musa's sons and later descendants would take up the leadership after his death, with some being irresponsible with the wealth and others actually saving and finding new gold mines and reinvesting it back into education and the army. With the eventual downfall of the whole Malian empire coming through by the 17th century or so, with the contact of European colonialism didn't help the down bad situation that the nation has been in since the fall of Mansa Musa, with the borders of the nation completely being reshaped by France in those times, resulting in a nation that is now in the current day far from its peak, with Mali being one of the poorest countries in the world and having all sorts of economic challenges. Everything from poor infrastructure, ethnic and religious conflicts, mass poverty, exploitation, etc., etc. Mali is one of those countries that I kind of find intriguing, and I do hope that the nation does go back to its former glory. It's one of those ironic moments in history like the Mongols, being that they were once the largest empire by continuous landmass at around the same time, but have greatly reduced themselves to the lands that they came from. Yet both of these historical figures and their countries are remembered for their great achievements, even if the nation doesn't really look the same in the modern era. That concludes my video on Mansa Musa and the Malian Empire. If you enjoyed that video, please like, comment, subscribe, as well as hitting the social media links down in the description. I really liked making this video and I really want to continue making more mini documentary type videos and just videos in general. If anything seems out of place or out of order, it's because the sources are a little all over the place and I'm kind of new to this format. Leaving feedback would be greatly appreciated and I can improve my content in the future. Trying to make this channel both as entertaining and as educational as possible, so the support really makes my day. Thank you. また来回簡単に思い浮かぶ最初は俺が勝つゲーム後からついてくるや女にはゴール待つボリボリ言っても俺はできないバスケ大ちゃんの財布中フル千円札夏目好きな夢を見せてもらい枕にはお前もやりたいことあるならやれちゃって入ってないマンチ毎晩貸し口にした真面目なママが言いたい誰に似た刺激もらった夜と金ないアマラッパーイケてるとこ見せたいルカミ君勘ぐったりしないこのドープは入れても勘ぐったりしない捨てる煙前とは別人入れ墨手首はみ出る別に気にしてないからまた入れたいやがるまま少しかたじけない